All right, welcome to the Recovery Edge podcast. Um, my name is Alfredo. I'm an alcoholic, and today I'm sitting here with Mike virtually. And Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself, friend.
Hi, Alfredo. Yes, I'm Mike, and I'm an alcoholic, and it's good to be back on the Recovery Edge podcast. I was on it 3 years ago today.
Yeah, welcome back. I think it's awesome, man. And we've always kind of stayed in touch, anyways, throughout the years, and I think we've seen each other just kind of grow spiritually through recovery and just keep in touch throughout these weird times, right? With
hmm
COVID and everything that's been happening in our lives. I say weird, but they're kind of good things too. So it's been a pleasure, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Why don't you tell us? Why don't you just give us your sobriety date and your home group, and we'll go from there.
Okay, yeah. So my sobriety date is January 1st, 2017. So today I'm celebrating 7 years of continuous sobriety. My home group was Happy Trudgers, which is where we met, and that's an AA meeting, and then also a CA meeting, meeting number one. But over the last 3 months, I've been doing Zoom meetings due to some circumstances that came up at home, and my Zoom meetings that are my home groups now are an AA meeting called the AWOL Noon Zoom, and then a CA meeting called Zoom into Recovery.
That's
And so those are like my temporary home groups, but I have enjoyed meeting these people and being involved, that I will probably continue with the Zoom even after I go back to in person.
that's pretty cool. Um, I know a lot of people kind of discount the Zooms, but I think before we were recording, you had said that you kind of get what you put in into Zoom meetings, you know? Um, and I'm happy that there's still the popularity of the Zoom meetings because a lot of people aren't really back in office and, things shut down. I was in a meeting yesterday that it was its final meeting, because after COVID, it just never got traction again. So it's beneficial that we still get the Zoom and the online capabilities, and people kind of learned how to navigate that because some of these meetings in person just didn't last, didn't make it through.
Yeah, and I think about a week before I had to start doing Zoom meetings, I was saying how I was not a fan of Zoom, and I liked using my feet to get sober and
Mhm.
stay sober, and then yeah, I mean, I had the option of either not doing anything or doing these Zoom meetings, and
Yeah.
my sponsor, he's at the AWOL Zoom, and I treated them like a real meeting. Turned my camera on, put my phone on do not disturb,
Mm-hmm.
turn off the chat on the Zoom because that's a distraction as well, and yeah, and then the meetings are different, the two that I go to, but one of them's a ton of newcomers, and it's people in the UK, and I feel like a responsibility to try to share the message and focus on the topic. And I've been able to connect with a few folks on that meeting just via WhatsApp, and then I've been able to chair. I got like a weekly chair spot on the noon AWOL Zoom as well.
Awesome. So now we have a good idea how things are a little different from 3 years ago. But why don't you go ahead and just tell us, what it was like, what happened, what it's like today, and then catch us up on the last 3 years since your last appearance on the podcast.
Sounds good. and yeah, I'm going to focus a lot less on what it was like, because if
Yeah.
anyone wants to hear my, entire drinking and drug career, if they really want to, they can go back to like January of 2021 and listen to that. I
I'll put a link in
spent,
the description for sure.
I spent a lot of time on what it was like. And I think, looking back when we did this in January of 2021, the program that I was working was not like super strong at that time.
Hmm.
Um, I think I was doing maybe 2 meetings a week at Happy Treasures, and I was skiing a lot. I mean, and I always have kept in touch with people in the program, but yeah, I mean, things were still kind of, um, I don't know, not moving along as much just because of like the pandemic. And then since then, like, so I'll tell a little bit about, I guess, what it was like for those who do not want to go listen to the older podcast. Yeah, I mean, so I started drinking and doing drugs, like smoking pot. That was the first time I changed my state of consciousness, and that was when I was 15. I smoked pot for the first time, and once I got high, I kind of wanted to do that like all the time. And the first time I got drunk, I really enjoyed it, and it felt like, I don't know, just a release. And like, I don't think I was like an alcoholic from birth. Um, I think that I eventually crossed the line, um, and that happened when I was in like, in high school, like junior, senior year. It started to get a little more out of control. But really, when I got to college, I feel like I blacked out like most times that I drank, and I started blacking out even when I didn't want to. I mean, plenty of times there were that was the goal, but eventually got to the point where I was, I'd be passed out like before the party even started, and I didn't enjoy that. And my nickname in college became Drunk Mike, and yeah, along with that, I did a lot of hallucinogens and ecstasy, and really liked the pharmaceuticals, and yeah, I just kind of like went along, and it didn't become a problem until, well, I didn't suffer too many consequences, but now as I'm talking, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I did get a DUI
Yeah, it is
when I
kind of
was
funny that you
19.
said it didn't become a problem. And I'm like, that sounds like it was a problem, man.
Yeah, it was a problem. I think I got 4 minor possessions in high school. I got a DUI my sophomore year of college. I didn't even have a car, but I managed to get a DUI. 3 weeks later, got arrested in Atlanta at a Widespread Panic show for New Year's. And then, fast forward, my first introduction to recovery, my buddy said, "Hey, do you want to go to an AA meeting?" And I'd been using cocaine and Xanax all day that day, but I was like, "Sure, I'll go check it out." And went to a meeting, barely remember it, and that's when I left that meeting and ended up getting into a significant car accident where I was found without a pulse and airlifted to the hospital, and woke up in the ICU with the managing partner of my CPA firm at the time. He was on the phone with my parents, and that was like my first, oh, this is like a real problem, and I have to get help. And so that was March of 2007, and I went. I got into an outpatient rehab and did 90 and 90 with the AA and stayed sober 6 months, but wasn't fully invested. Didn't, once I hit the 90, I dropped down to like 2 meetings a week. And yeah, I eventually relapsed and tried to come back briefly, but yeah, my heart wasn't into it, and I had more research to do. So over the next few years, I became addicted to OxyContin, and that was like physically addicting, and eventually had to get on a drug called Suboxone to get off of that, and tried coming back to AA, but didn't really work the program, and I got out of it what I put into it. So yeah, I was in and out from 2007 to from March of 07 to March of 2010. And then I didn't come back into the rooms until January 1st of 2017. And in those intervening years, it's a progressive disease. It always, it got worse. I like the line in the book that we are like men and women who, lose their legs, they never grow back. Mm-hmm. I fully believe that. And yeah, I mean, I crossed the line. Once I crossed the line of blacking out most nights, I never was able to avoid that. If I did, I was not happy. I, was upset that I wasn't hammered when drinking. And yeah, and my drinking and drug career was summed up by just, once I started, I couldn't control the amount that I took. And if I quit for a period of time, I couldn't stay stopped. So yeah, January 1st, 2017, came in, got a sponsor right away. Met you, I think probably on January 3rd. I remember you were at the Trudge talking about traveling through the airport. And I think you got a 60-day chip pretty early when I was in. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad I haven't had to look back. You and I have that in common as someone who have come in here and picked up some monthly chips and then gone back out. And for the folks that, relapse, I just want to say it is possible to get this thing, if you don't get it on your first try. I mean, it took me a long time before I got it. But what I will say is every time that I had a little bit of time and I relapsed, I lost that first line of defense. And it was really hard to come back. There's shame involved, and it's better to stay. And I know you can relate to that.
I say that's a lot of my ego was killing me, and it was an obstacle that I just had to get over if I wanted to save my life. And it's crazy, but my ego almost killed me. I had to get over a lot of things. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I want to talk I want to move up to so the year of 2021, after we did this podcast, I feel like the Trudger's room eventually moved from the banquet hall to the basement. And I think that happened in 2021 at some point, maybe late in the year. But, I think I was still doing maybe 2 meetings a week, 2 to 3 in 2021. I started going back to York Street some too, just because I needed a variety. But it was January 1st, 2022, when I was celebrating 5 years. I went back to a CA meeting that I used to go to. The first happened to fall on January, on a Saturday. And so I went back to this meeting called meeting number one. And, ego kept me from going back to CA for a while because I was like, I've kind of, didn't go to that program for 2 years, and these people, they don't want me to just show up after being gone. And then I took a step back and I was like, wait a minute, like if I've still been sober, how would someone who's
Mm.
relapsed feel? And so I went and I got my 5-year chip at meeting number one. And I started going to that meeting every Saturday, and I became the secretary, and I got involved. And it was like a commitment. Like I was like, I need to be there every Saturday. And I got, it was like great to reconnect with all these people from CA. And it taught me, like, I was the chip and lit person at Trudge, I think, since 2017.
Hmm.
And that's a very easy service position. That's my style. But the becoming a secretary at the meeting number one, it taught me, like, these meetings don't just happen. Like, you don't just show up and they're there. It's like there's a lot of work that goes into them. And it just taught me, the importance of service work, and really gave me more of a purpose. And so yeah, at meeting number one, there was a guy who had a month sober when I picked up my 5-year chip, and he was making the coffee for the meeting, and when I became secretary, and he had to be there an hour early, where I only had to get there a half an hour early every week. But we developed a friendship, and he's still sober today. He has 2 years and a month, and having to get there early every week and develop a relationship with these people, it was like, truly beneficial to my sobriety. And I know from all the service work that you've done over the years, especially early on, like how important that is. And so yeah, I mean, 2022 is when I feel like my recovery kicked into high gear again, and I became, I had a commitment to be at this meeting every Saturday, and then I would go to Trudge typically like twice a week. And then 2023 rolls around, and my goal at the beginning of the year was to do 3 meetings a week. It was going to be the Saturday morning meeting, meeting number one, and then 2 days at Trudge. But then I got the opportunity I picked up a couple sponsees. So I ended up doing 3 days at Trudge, because I would meet these sponsees and then go to Trudgers with them. And then I also picked up a Sunday AA meeting that I really liked. It was at the Alano Club at 10 a.m. on Sundays. And so I found myself doing 5 meetings a week when I planned on doing 3. And I did that for most of like the first 3 quarters of 2023, up until, got COVID, gave it to my wife. We're going through a bunch of stuff. It had a major impact on scheduling. And ever since then, I've been doing the Zoom. But I was doing Zoom 7 days a week because I was like, I don't feel like I'm going to drink or use, but I feel like I can be on my computer for 1 hour a day. I mean, how hard is that? And the Zoom actually saves a lot of time, like travel time, and you can hop on right before and get off right after if you're busy. That's one thing that I should probably work on, is getting there early, and because they actually do like show up early and stay late. And so yeah, I mean, that's how it's been. I think this year has been, one of the best years for my sobriety, just because I picked up some sponsees, and they were all going through the work at the same time. So it was like I had two sponsees and that was enough. But then this guy was like, "Hey man, will you be my sponsor?" And I was like, "I really don't have time." But I knew in my heart that I had to say yes after he asked again. And and each one was a different experience. They always teach me a lot about myself.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I feel like I treat each sponsee differently based on like how willing they are to do the work. And sometimes I can, you know, if I get really frustrated, I guess I can let that show. And one of the sponsees let me know
Mm.
that I was a little critical. Um,
That's
but
constructive criticism, right?
yeah, it made me take a step back and look at how I was communicating though. And yeah, I mean, I just wish that, you know, like I know some people can come in and they have this attitude like I'm just gonna get sober and like leave.
Hmm.
A lot of people have that. I mean, I had those attitudes at some, you know, early, like not in this time in my recovery, but in the previous times when it didn't work. And there is just some like I can't explain it, but when you get the opportunity to like read the book with someone and like help them, and then when they go on to want to carry the message to others, I mean, that's like the coolest thing, and that's what this is all about. And I've also had the opportunity in the past year to help a family friend. Um, so it was, you know, great seeing her get sober and do this thing and like be of service. Um, and I thought a lot about like throughout the year, just the responsibility statement. Like, um, it is like, I am responsible. I want the hand of A to be there whenever someone reaches out for help. I want the hand of A to
Hmm.
be there, and for that, I am responsible. Um, I think a lot about that, and I also think a lot about a vision for you that, you know, give freely of what you find and join us as we trudge the road of happy destiny. And those have been critical, you know, to my sobriety. And I think it's really important. Like the people that really live the program need to follow that. Um, and yeah, and I can relate to you so much when you and Kayla were talking about the phone call you received. Uh, Maybe on Christmas Eve or something,
Hmm.
or you know, you got a call from a newcomer, and I'm guilty of that too. When someone calls, I'm just like, ah, but you have to answer the phone. It's you're required to. I mean, it is
Hmm.
you have to. And then once you do, it's just like, you know, it's just like why was I resisting?
Yeah, it's like the best feeling ever. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
uh, yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean that kind of brings me to present day. I was thinking about, you know, people ask about New Year's resolutions and things like that,
Hmm.
and my one thing I'm going to try to do. It's nice and vague, so it's hard to measure, but just try to live the Serenity Prayer. Um, I, you know, one thing I've done over the last year is I've prayed a lot, which was it was not part of my recovery before, a whole lot, like in the last few years, but I've I've definitely prayed a lot more just because of things that have been going on in life. But the majority of my prayers are just, you know, praying for others. And it says in the book we have to turn our thoughts to others. Um, but yeah, and thinking about, you know, I was talking to a family friend who's in recovery now earlier this morning, and she asked what my resolutions were and or if I do those things, and I was like, well, stay sober. That's number one. But yeah, I want to try to live this live the Serenity Prayer, and also I'm trying to clean up my language. So
That's funny how that works, right? Like we come into AA and we're like, oh, everybody can curse and talk about God. This is so cool. And then as we stick around longer and longer, we start cleaning up our language. It's so weird.
yeah, and I mean it's something that I'm gonna have to work on because I already dropped an F bomb this morning when my wife and I were talking about how, I was thinking previous New Year's. I met her in March of 2014, but I didn't get sober till January of 2017. So we had a couple New Years together. And I said, oh, like, I'm trying to think, like, yeah, I remember 2014, we got effed up. I said the word, though. And then I was like, oh, I caught myself. And so, yeah, it's like a character defect. I need to work on it every day, and retrain my brain to not swear so much. Because I could be talking to my boss about, like, you know, uh, just a problem
Mm-hmm.
and or something good. And so yeah, it's something I'm going to try to do. And I feel like I've been working on that in meetings for a while because, Sobercast is in my ear a lot, and these people talk about not swearing from the podium. And I think it's just good to try to lead by example, and there's always room for improvement.
You might have already answered this, but let me just ask anyways. Have you come across you got 7 years now, but throughout that time, have you felt like you've been in a funk and what did you do to kind of get out of it?
Yes, I definitely have been in bunks throughout sobriety. I think, you know, that happened more before COVID. Um, and I would just have to like switch up my meetings a little bit or go to other meetings. Um, I found that to be very useful. When my wife and I like bought this house and had to go through that whole moving process, I remember that was like a really stressful time. I think like divorce and moving are some of the most stressful things you can go through in life. You recently moved, maybe you
Yeah,
can
it's
attest to that.
you're right.
Yeah. um, and I found myself, I mean, I was going to like the 7 a.m. at York, and then I would go to Happy Trudger. Like I had to like redouble my efforts. And it wasn't, I would say I've never been close to drinking or using throughout my time in sobriety this time. Like those are out of the question. But the only reason it is that way, it's because I start my day with like the daily reflection and the 24-hour a day book and the CA quiet peace daily meditate. Like I put recovery in my face right every morning when I'm brushing my teeth, and and then I try to hit a meeting, and I just try to do things that are positive for my recovery. But I think yeah, I avoid the funk by just doing what was suggested early on and trying to continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, yeah, I guess in the past year there was a funk, and that happened after we got COVID, and I went a week without any Zoom or in-person meetings, and I was just kind of like I was hesitant to do the Zoom, and I was yeah, I mean I was very powerless over the situation. We didn't know what was going to happen with our schedule. And, I felt terrible that I gave my wife COVID when, we had actually like talked about it prior. Like maybe I should not go to meetings and do
Mm-hmm.
Zoom for a couple weeks. And I was like, no, I have to be there. And, but yeah, I got into a funk that week because I was essentially not doing anything for my recovery besides praying. And and then yeah, it was like I went to a meeting the following Monday, and I went to a meeting every day since, and got like, it's been a different experience, but it's been great, and I feel very solid, as a result of it.
So, for anybody who hasn't heard your story before, you mentioned earlier about being in this big car accident and they finding you without a pulse. Reflecting on that now, how does that affect your recovery? Like somebody would probably say, "Oh my God, God gave me a second chance. I am so lucky," or something. What do you think?
Um, yeah, I mean, I was given a second chance. I was given many more after that. And I I mean, when I got sober at that time, I thought I was going to be sober for the rest of my life. I had this, I was on the pink cloud, and I thought I was like, there's no way I'd go back to drinking. And, a trip to Hawaii by myself, like it took an hour after landing, to completely,
Amazing.
yeah.
I get it.
Um,
I was a problem
um,
traveler myself.
yeah. I think back, like now, today, like what got me sober this time, it was an emotional bottom that I hit at the end. And that's what got me back into the rooms. It was like, a great sequence of events of, getting blackout drunk on Christmas Eve and seeing the look on my family's face the next morning, and hooking up with my brother-in-law who had, like, 15 years at the time, and talking to his dad who had 35 years at the time. And I it's like I haven't had a drink since that Christmas Eve, probably like more like 2 a.m. Christmas of 2016. But I came back to Denver, and talk about, the changing your mind thing. Like I remember being on the plane, like I had drugs back in Denver. I had like an 8 ball of Coke and a bunch of Xanax. And I remember, like, on the drive to the airport, I'm crying in the back seat of my dad. My dad's driving, my wife and I, or she was my fiance at the time. And I'm texting a friend that I know is in recovery. And I'm like, hey, I need to flush this stuff as soon as I get back to Denver and go to a meeting. And then while on the plane, an hour later, I think, I should probably just do the rest of that stuff. I mean, out of my mind. And I continued to use for a week. And then I called my brother-in-law's father and told him that I was like, hey, I didn't drink this past week, but I've been doing drugs. And he told me to go to a meeting. And so I did, and I feel like, yeah, I got sober by like seconds and inches. I went to that meeting on New Year's Eve, and there was one guy there. His name was Mario, and we had a meeting. And I text him every New Year's Eve, and I thank him. And I remember coming home from that meeting, and I was shocked that my wife wasn't happy. That I was expecting a parade because I went to a meeting. She was like, no, like, you've been using drugs for the last 11 months. I thought you quit. And I was ready to go back out, but she said, why don't you call that guy you met? And I did. And he picked up the phone, and yeah, I'm like forever grateful for that. And I think about that. Like, that's why I love, that's like, whenever you hit a milestone, it's a great time to reflect. And if I didn't call that guy, and I would have gone out on that New Year's Eve, I probably wouldn't have woken up and gone to the meeting the next day, and I probably wouldn't be married today. I mean, I and something something happened where it's like I woke up the next morning and was like looking online at meetings, and I went to two that day, and yeah, it's like just one foot in front of the other ever since. And I'm just like, I'm really grateful that like the stars aligned and I was able to get in. And now today with the near death stuff, I mean, I was a drug user, so fentanyl wasn't around when I got sober. Um, I would most likely be dead if I continued on that path because I would have probably been seeking it. That's just the way that I partied. And when I say partied, I mean I was doing cocaine in an office by myself like, during the week. I mean that's hardly a party.
Right.
But that's how I live. And I'm really grateful that, I mean, we get to live a life beyond our wildest dreams, no matter what happens. It's like, at least we got our sobriety, and, this too shall pass when those challenges do come up.
How are you balancing your marriage and life with your AA? And you're probably pretty good at it by now after 7 years, of course. But I thought it would be helpful information, especially for somebody who's newly wed like myself.
Yeah, I have always tried to do noon meetings, or meetings in the morning, meetings at time where my wife and I are like not generally hanging out. Like I've never been like a big evening meeting guy. And I mean, you're lucky your wife is in the program, so she understands all this stuff. You can go to meetings together, but yeah, I've always tried to be respectful of our time, and I will ask permission, but she always says yes, and she fully supports my recovery. I mean, she tells me if I need a meeting. I mean, luckily I go to so many, now that's not really like a thing. She'll just tell me when I'm being a jerk. Because that can happen. But yeah, I think for me, Trudgers was like beneficial because it's just like my office is near there, and it's like go downtown, go to the meeting, and then head home. But I just like I've never really done a lot of evening meetings, and that seems to work for us. And on the weekend meetings, a lot of times I would go to the CA meeting, and then I would pick us up lunch afterwards. So we get to have lunch together. And then on the Sunday meeting, because it was at 10, it ended at 11, and we could go get pho afterwards. And we kind of had these nice routines around my weekend meetings.
And then the final question here, and this one is more for the newcomer though, a piece of advice or words of wisdom for the newcomer, or just maybe Mike in his first month or so, like what give us the secret.
There is no secret. So focusing on the similarities and not the differences, that was crucial. And early on, I kept getting to meetings like a minute or two late. And this guy pulled me aside afterwards and said, "Hey man, you need to get there early, and you need to stay afterwards. You need to get phone numbers and text and call those people." And so that's what I did. And my phone, I probably have multiple hundreds of people from the program in my phone. And I put an A for their last name, just an A, not an AA, just an A. So they're at the top of my contact list. And most of those people I haven't had contact with for many, many years, but if they ever do call, I want to answer the phone. But yeah, just like everyone says, go to meetings every day, or go whenever you can, make them a priority in your life. I realize from like having a professional background that like sometimes you can't make it, and as long as you're making recovery a priority, and you have a sponsor and you're working with that sponsor, and getting involved, I mean, your chances are going to be good. I mean, but you have to really be ready to get sober, I feel like, in order to actually get sober. That sounded like pretty wishy-washy advice.
No, I think it hits the mark. Hey, thanks for being on the show, and a happy 2024. I can't believe it's here. And I can't believe you're at 7 years, man. That means I'm right behind you, ready for mine. So, ready for my 6.
Yeah. So what are you doing to celebrate your 6?
I'll be going to, well, I'm going to bring my wife home from the hospital.
Wonderful.
And before that, I'm going to hit the Trudgers meeting to get a chip.
Do you want to stop by my house and pick up my 6-year chip? You can.
That'd be awesome, man.
Yeah.
Text me your address and I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to give it to you. It's on
I
your
would
way.
love to have it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's cool. And then when I eventually pick up a 7-year, maybe we can keep this tradition going. But yeah, man, I really hope we stay a year and a day apart. It has been, and this podcast, like, it brings me so much joy whenever I see there's a new episode. So I mean, I really appreciate it, and hearing about yours and Kayla's journey, and just like, what you guys have been through. I know it's been a lot, and I think about you guys a lot, and it does put things into perspective. And I'm looking forward to meeting her one day, because I've not met her, but I've heard her a bunch. And I would say, don't forget to let everyone know where they can find this podcast.
Hey, at recoveryedgepodcast.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places that you like to check out your podcast. Share us with a friend. I appreciate you always listening, Mike, and I appreciate you coming on the show. I love you, man. And
yeah, I love you too.
I hope that we can, thank you. And I hope that it's always like this, a year and a day, and we'll just take it one day at a time, brother.